Hey, it's Dr. Bryce Lee with StrengthSpace again, and I'm back with another frequent question I get from my clients. This one is about VO2 max. Is VO2 max important? Should I be worrying about it? Is it an indicator of longevity, and what should I do about it? And should I be doing lots of cardio to address it? So last, question we had was about grip strength and how grip is actually a proxy for whole body strength. If we have a weak grip, the reason that's dangerous is because it means everything else in my body is also likely weak. And that's really where the risk comes from, not just necessarily the grip. Well, in the same way, VO2 max is a very robust indicator of our mortality risk, our risk of dying in the next 5 or 10 years. Most of that risk comes when we're in the bottom quartile or quintile, meaning the bottom 25 or 20% of people with VO2 max for our age. So if we are in the bottom range for that, that carries with it a lot of risk for things like heart disease, even things like dementia, diabetes. We don't want to be down there. And so the question is, what should we do? Should we immediately go get on the treadmill or the elliptical? What I'm not going to do is argue against cardiovascular training and physical activity. I think that our bodies are meant to move. And we, in our natural environment, again, thinking about where we were before we were civilized and put into the zoo of modern suburbia, we would have been walking miles per day and getting lots of robust physical activity. So I'm not trying to poo-poo or downplay the importance of that. But let's talk a little bit about what VO2 max actually is, and then we'll get a clue about what we should focus most of our efforts on. VO2 max means the amount of oxygen that our body can deliver through the cardiovascular system to our working muscles. It's a measurement of our aerobic capacity and fitness. And when we measure it in terms of liters per minute of oxygen per kilogram of body weight. And what that means is that the heavier we are, the lower our VO2 max will be given the same amount of oxygen throughput. So if we want to get our VO2 max to be optimal, what we need to be is strong and trim, right? If we have a very low muscle mass to body weight ratio, then that means we'll have a small amount of muscle, which can't consume very much oxygen, and a very high weight. Whereas if we have a lot of muscle and that we keep that muscle in good fitness, then that we have a large capacity to consume oxygen and our weight is lower, we have the potential mathematically to have a higher VO2 max. Once we have that in place, then we absolutely can start to think about improving it by specialized routines. If that's something of concern to you, you can do, there is a role for steady state cardiovascular training to try to nudge up the VO2 max, and also for much higher efforts like interval and sprint training. You'll hear about the concept of building a pyramid. You need a wide base, meaning lots of low level effort, and then a high peak to make the pyramid, meaning very high effort sprint and maximal effort exertion, really getting huffing and puffing and things like that. So lots of activity plus sprinting can really maximize our VO2 max. But all of that is pretty moot if we don't first address the idea of high muscle mass to weight ratio. If we are carrying a lot of excess body fat, that's going to just mathematically lower our VO2 max. And similarly, if we're under-muscled, we're going to have a lower VO2 max. And that's, I think, what's happening. When we look at the lowest quartile or the lowest quintile in most of these studies on VO2 max and mortality, what we're seeing is that the people at the bottom are frail and overweight, and that is where most of the risk is coming from. And there is benefit in trying to be in the top quartile. The people in the top quartile do have a small benefit over the people in the second, right? So if you're in the top 10% of your age group for VO2 max, that is better than being in the middle 40 or the top 30 or 40%. But most of the risk really accelerates near the bottom. And that tells us that it has a lot to do with body composition just based on the nature of the measurement. So absolutely, we should think about optimizing our VO2 max. We should engage in strength training and also in robust physical activity outside the gym or steady state cardio if that's what you prefer, but trying to be as active as possible. But most of our risk mitigation will just come from being trim and strong, from eating a diet that makes it easy to portion control so we don't have to engage in a lot of willpower and we can manage our body composition, and by engaging in a strength training program that maximizes our strength, maximizes the health of our muscle tissue so that we can consume oxygen when we need it. That is going to do most of the heavy lifting for getting our VO2 max out of the danger zone of being in the bottom 20 or 25% of our age group. I hope that helps. Again, not trying to downplay the importance or relevance of cardiovascular exercise, but what I would say is that being strong and having an exercise program that can sustain you throughout your life without getting injured is really going to be the cornerstone from an exercise perspective. And nutrition is going to be the cornerstone from a body weight perspective to maximize VO2 max for a person and mitigate as much of their mortality risk as possible. So I hope that answers that question for you. Again, Dr. Bryce Lee with StrengthSpace. Tune in for more. Thanks.